All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and if you're wondering why that happens sometimes, where I start it, then I stop it, and then I restart, that's because there can be delays with the audio, and I really need to always reset just before I go live the software that I use, which is OBS Studio. That's freeware, it's totally open source, so there can be some glitches. I know there are professional live streaming software packages that probably don't have some of the same issues, but um, you have to pay a subscription for that, and they're very expensive up front. And probably the if you've got 1 million subscribers, it's worth it. Maybe. I know a lot of live streamers, a lot of YouTubers just use OBS, and it is incredibly powerful. But that's one of the little bugs. You do get those built-in delays on occasion, and it's strange because once I start it, if I go fresh with a brand new restart of OBS and then I go live right away, I don't get the delays. But sometimes if I'm fiddling around with OBS with the settings before I go live and then I forget to shut the program down immediately, I'll get that delay. And I don't want to have that where I'm talking and then you see my mouth, my lips move, but you don't hear me. There's always going to be a tiny bit of delay because sound travels more slowly than light, obviously, but it's a pretty minimal issue if I remember to reset, restart. And usually when I don't have a guest, like I don't have Arlen or someone else, there's less of an issue because sometimes you get the delays when I'm trying to get them on and have all the audio perfect. But today, for whatever reason, there was a little bit of a delay, and I noticed that immediately. As soon as I started talking, I could see that the sound levels weren't moving in sync with my actual speaking. So that's why I shut it down. I apologize for that, folks. If there's an issue, again, it's Halitics. I'm Hal. Click subscribe, please. I want this thing to blow up. And we're going to start with Shade. Shade is an absolutely super loyal, awesome listener, viewer. He's been with me since long before, I ended my radio career. Sadly, had to end it for financial reasons, and I wish that hadn't happened. The goal had originally been to see a true progressive radio network metastasize across the nation. Metastasize would probably be the way a lot of hopefully plutocrats would have viewed us, but it just didn't happen. So I'm doing this right now on YouTube, and I love it because I can say whatever I want. I don't have to in any way conform my views to anybody who's paying me a salary. I just say what I believe, and I try to be as honest with you as I can be, as well as reconsider my views if the evidence doesn't support them. I try my best. So here's Shade, and I take what Shade has to say very, very seriously because he's always been there for me, providing a lot of help and technical support, especially early on with this live stream when there were issues, more issues even than now. So here's what he has to say. You complain that almost nobody agrees with you that progressives should always vote for the most progressive candidate, even though that often splits off the progressive vote and elects the conservative. So let's start with that comment. I honestly don't think I was complaining. I mean, I didn't go back and listen to yesterday's program, Shade and other viewers. I really didn't. I didn't go back and watch it. I just, once it's in the can for me, it's kind of in the can. Sometimes I go back to watch to judge me, so I can kind of critique myself, but that's hard to do. But I do it. But I just didn't really want to go back and watch the whole live stream, the whole video. I don't really think I was complaining. I was more kind of raising that as an issue. I've always said in the past, in fact, what I clarified yesterday was that I've always promoted the view that one should vote for the most viable, the most progressive viable. In other words, a candidate who can win, who's viable. And that would generally rule out people like Dr. West, Jill Stein in 2016, for whom I voted. And I kind of changed my tune a little bit in 2016 because my view was that both candidates were bad. Both candidates would cause problems, would make things worse. And that's where I've kind of, tried to draw that line. Yes, vote for the most progressive, viable candidate unless there's no viable candidate who will make things better, and unless you believe both candidates will make things worse. And I think in 2016 there wasn't even really a progressive, right? You had two regressive candidates. So I don't know that I was complaining, nor do I say almost nobody agrees with me. I think obviously some people agree with me. I mean, I don't vote alone, but I would like to have a groundswell. I think it's very, very tough in 2024. I really do. And so I'm going to sort of try to explain where I come down in 2024. Maybe it's even tougher now with the latest controversy surrounding Dr. West, right? Because he does owe back taxes, and apparently, at least there's an allegation he hasn't paid his child support. And for me, they're not the worst thing you could do. It's not like I rule him out completely as somebody I would vote for, but I'm not happy about it. It's not something I like. It's not something that makes me want to support him more. So that's another issue that's come up. So I think my view is a little more nuanced than you're giving me credit for, Shade, but, whatever. I mean, you're allowed to hear it. You hear it the way you hear it, and hopefully I'll do a better job in the future, not, being more open to different views. That's really all I can say. Then with respect to that, I don't necessarily agree, though, that it often elects the conservative. If that happens, it happens. I don't think we have to worry inordinately when you have two bad. My view on Trump versus Clinton is they were both bad, and I wasn't going to worry too much about maybe helping Trump, because Clinton was herself someone who I had a lot of really serious concerns about, and especially when it came to the military, but also when it came to domestic policy and globalism, where I think she was worse than Trump. So, I don't think in that case we had two bad choices. So that's all I can say. By the way, good morning, flying robot. Also, to continue, Shade complains, I think complain is the right word, or at least criticize me for not often checking or for not checking chat feedback during the show and not displaying posted chats. So let me get to that sense. Well, right now I'm actually looking at the chat, but it's true. I do sometimes ignore the chat. I'll try to be better about looking at the chat. It's just there's a lot of stuff, a lot of balls in the air, because I got to keep the slides on the screen, or make sure I have the slides, make sure everything looks good, not have too much overlap on what's displayed. So I do the best I can. Sometimes I fall flat there, but I will try to do better. With regard to displaying the posted chats, you have to watch the video even on replay, and then they'll pop up at the point where they are where somebody posted. So it's not that I don't display them. I have everything set to public. Everything should show, but you aren't going to see posted chats at the end of the show when you watch the replay. And finally, it's the comments, though, that should always be there. Now, if I'm making a mistake here, if I'm doing something wrong, please let me know. Text me or call me or what have you. I'm easy to reach. By the way, 240-363-7190 if you want to call me at this point. I love to chat with you, 240-363-7190. And yeah, you think we're at an impasse. I don't know where to go with that. I hope we're not at an impasse. I will continue to try to do the best program I can and to respect alternative views. So I do get it. It is tough. You have to make a lot of politics is tough choices. I wish we had ranked choice voting. It would be much easier. Then you could vote for your first choice, your second, your third. Now, to be honest with you, in 2016, I probably would have only voted for Jill Stein as number one. I don't know that I would have put Hillary number two. I wasn't persuaded that Hillary would be a better president or a less bad president than Trump. I just wasn't there. When it came to the war, when it came to the Mike military-industrial complex, when it came to her ties to corporate America, I wasn't convinced she would be a less bad president than Trump. It's that simple. I was convinced even in 2020 that Biden would likely be a less bad president than Trump. So I voted for Biden, and on balance, I'm okay with that vote. But in 2024, I've been saying vote for Dr. West. I've been saying that over and over. I still am leaning towards West, but maybe I'm not as strong as I was. And I want to thank Tim, who I don't know if Tim is Flying Robot. Maybe he is. But Tim brought this to my attention. I was not aware of the issues involving Dr. West and child support until Tim brought this to my attention. This brought this to all of our attentions in Halitics, but many of you probably already knew, or maybe some of you knew. And he asked, do you think this poses a problem for Dr. West? And I will admit, when I first read this, I was a little bit irritated, frankly, with Tim for pointing this out, mainly because this video comes from David Pakman. And David Pakman is not one of my favorite live streamers. You know who I like? I like one of my favorite video casters. I like Brianna Joy Gray a lot. I tend to often like and often sometimes not like Jimmy Dore. Pakman and Cedar are two that I really dislike. I think they're very, very tight with the corporate establishment of the Democratic Party. And like Cenk over at TYT, they tend to repeat lines that are fed them, I believe, by the DNC. They're not as, well, Cenk isn't quite as bad. To be fair, he's not as bad. But I think Cedar and Pakman are kind of controlled opposition. I don't like them. But this is an important story. This is a real story. This is a legit story. It was first brought, I guess, out in Newsweek, or the Daily Beast as it's now called, that Dr. West, Cornel West, I've often said, I've often urged you to vote to commit to Dr. West's candidacy as a third-party candidate for the Green Party. He's on with there's Laura Ingraham, who I've had my run-ins with her. I'm not a fan of hers, but I give her props for platforming West. The Daily Beast and then Pakman picked up the story that West owes a lot of back taxes to the IRS and to apparently child support. Now, he has two children. I looked this up. I was trying to figure it out. As best I can tell, it seems like it's reported everywhere he has two kids. And I think they're both well now adults. So if he owes any back child support, it's because he didn't pay it when they were, under 18 or under 21. And that's a problem. You got to pay your child support. I'm not going to justify that. I will say, when I was working for the DC government in the family division of the Office of the Corporation Counsel, I would see people, mostly husbands, mostly fathers, who were not paying their child support. And this was a big issue. And sometimes it was a problem because, frankly, the child support numbers were just unfair, I thought. I thought they just demanded too much of sometimes the higher earning parent. And they made it really, really hard for people to live. And you can make a million different, you don't have kids, this, that, and the other thing, don't leave your families. But I thought the numbers were a little bit, on occasion, unfairly high when a spouse or a parent, not necessarily a spouse, right? You might not have been married to your children's mother or father, but the parent who was ordered to pay child support, the non-custodial parent often, I just felt the numbers. They were just being asked to pay too high a percentage of their income, or often it was close, well over 50% of their income. So I have a little bit of sympathy for some people in that circumstance. But when you hear Dr. West's explanation, I lost some sympathy for him. So let's go to that. And I wanted to be as totally fair. And again, I am supporting Dr. West for president. I do believe at this point he is our best choice. But it's a little tougher to make that argument or to be too insistent for me, based on what he told Tim Black. And again, I do thank Tim very, very much for bringing this to our attention. Tim asked me if I was disappointed and him for bringing it to our attention. I'm not. I said I was disappointed in Halitics. I'm disappointed with Dr. West. I really am. Honestly, I was hoping for a little bit better from Dr. West than what I feel we got in this interview. And I play this because I think this is the best, fairest, and most comprehensive response that I've seen from Dr. West. So here we go. This is from Tim Black, with Dr. West, Dr. Cornel West on Tim Black TV. Here we go.
But the first thing we got to get out the way, man, is this Daily Beast article that made a lot of headway. First, it was just Daily Beast covering it, and then everyone else started picking it up. I saw ABC. I saw a couple of detractors talking about it as well. And I'm sure you're aware of it, and you wanted to get out in front of this and talk about it yourself. So they say that you owe about $500,000 in taxes and in child support. Dr. West, what do you say to these critics and these people who are bringing up this issue?
Well, one is, child support is a lie. I've always put high priority on my kids. In fact, I've treated them in an even lavish way, because I've always believed that they had a priority beyond anything else. And so when it comes to that particular front, that's just not true. It's just a matter of it's not recorded, but it's.
All right, I want to stop that there for a sec because I want to get that statement out by him, and you can see there's a little, let me see if I can get rid of that little, there we go. So so he says I treated my kids in a lavish way. I don't know. Look, again, they're adults. That sort of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way, the way he said that. Maybe that's totally true, or he perceives it, and perhaps compared to his background, but you should take care of your children. I don't feel like I've been maybe some people are. I don't know. That's a minor detail. I'm just giving my reaction. I didn't love that response, a lavish way. But what really bummed me out was when he said, well, it's not a matter of paying it. I always paid it. It's just a matter of recording it. And I'm like, wait, so you're saying you paid the support to your and Dr. West is married to his fifth wife. And I was thinking, well, maybe there was a lot of fact questions I had. Like, well, are there a lot of kids? Are there kids with different wives? Was there confusion? But no, Dr. West, at least everything I read, he has 2 kids, one from his first marriage, and I think one from his fourth, if I've got that right. So it's not like a ton of kids and he's paying different amounts in different places. I believe I got that right. I know it's 2, a son and a daughter. I believe first and fourth wives are the ones. So he don't have to pay to 2 ex-wives. Or maybe they're both with the first wife. I'm not clear. So I didn't love the word lavish, but I'm okay with it. Where I had a problem with, this is a Harvard professor. This is a Princeton professor. This is an extremely intelligent man. Very, very smart, obviously. There's no doubt about it. He's written books. He understands American politics better than probably just about anybody. But so what's this about recording? How are you not recording the child support? And I kind of get, okay, well, maybe you hand them $100 here or there. That's poor practice. You can't do that. You have to, it's fine if you want to give it to a gift and you're not considering it part, like, hey, kid wants to buy a, I don't know, this was back in the 80s, right? CD, video game, right? So here's $100. And it's not part of the child support, right? It's just a gift. That's fine. But the court has ordered you to pay a certain amount every month out of your income to take care of your kids. And if you don't have custody, you pay it to your ex-wife, your spouse, your ex-spouse, or the parent. Now, in his case, he was married to his children's mother. So it's not a question of having to send it to like a former girlfriend or someone of that nature. You have a court decree, have your wages garnish sheet or write a check, what have you, make sure it's recorded. So like you say you made the payment, but you got, I have a problem with saying it's not recorded. To me, that was poor financial practice. Now, does that mean I'm not going to support you? Do I believe you made the payments? Probably yes, but this is what happens when you don't pay. And probably the best practice really is to either send it to your attorney or some other form that's absolutely recorded upon receipt or upon cashing. So I think at best, Dr. West is guilty of carelessness right here, of pretty bad carelessness. I'm not happy about that. I'm trying to be as honest. 240-363-7190. 240-363-7190. All right, so here's from Emoji. Duopolists can be utterly corrupt murderers, but challengers must be perfect or suffer endless smears. Okay. I hear that. That's why I still support West, because I think he's better, because I go for policy. Policy trumps all as far as I'm concerned. But think of all the attacks we've seen on Trump for stuff that really is kind of personal, right? Whether it's, this, and maybe he did rape a woman, and that's very, very serious. I'm not saying it's not serious, but so is not paying your child support. That's serious too. Not as serious, but it's serious. And, constantly, we look at people's personal lives. I'm not going to ignore. This is, to me, something that's relevant. You should pay your child support. Now, does it mean I won't vote for him? I will. Now, let's listen to the rest of West's answer, because, again, I'm troubled by this. I'm not going to spend, this isn't going to be forever. But it's relevant.
Not true. But when it comes to the taxes, that's definitely true. I've been broke as a 10 Commandments since 1984. I've had waves of audits, waves of levies, waves of liens, and then the liabilities and the fees build up. So you get in the black hole. And I've always been honest about that. Always been honest about that. I am exactly like 63% of hardworking citizens in America who live paycheck to paycheck with dignity and determination and say, hey, I got to do it. Now, my paycheck's bigger than.
All right, well, I'm glad he said that. But again, that paycheck to paycheck, none of this to me goes over real well. And I remember I worked for a man when I was a lot younger. And he had a real good salary. Now, I would not say he was 1%. I know what he was making approximately, and it was good. It wasn't 1%, but was very, very solid upper middle class when there used to be a middle class in this country. And he once said to me, and we had a discussion about this, and he said, I live paycheck to paycheck. And I'm like, okay. But when we talk about living paycheck to paycheck, you're not making a lot of money. And your paycheck isn't secure. This gentleman had a very secure paycheck. There was virtually no way he wasn't going to get that check every 15 days, every 2 weeks, every 15 days, right? First and 15th, every month, first and 15th. So I'm like, it's not, I didn't say this, but I was like, it's not the same. You're living paycheck to paycheck, and I'm going to get to the next screen, but I want to just play a little more of let's go to the next screen real quick. It's not the same as someone who could see their job offshored and you're a professor, you have tenure. Apparently his base pay there is about $100,000 a year at Princeton. That seems awfully low. I read that at a site. That seems awfully low. I can't believe that's the base pay, but maybe it is because he has other sources of income, books and speaking. And I did find this is from, I believe this group represents him. I was trying to be as fair as possible. So this group represents Dr. West, AAE, All American Exchange, I believe is what they're called. Maybe I got that wrong. And I circled at the bottom there, his speaking fees are very high. 50 to 100K for a live event, 30 to 50,000. You give 3 or 4 speeches, you're getting close to that 1%. You're not there, but you're getting there. Now I know he has to pay his booker, and he doesn't get all that. But then you throw in what he's making at Princeton, the any kind of book residuals. Dr. West is living pretty well. very well. Now, is he a billionaire? No, absolutely not. Of course not. Not even close. But it's not the same as somebody who's working 2 or 3 jobs. And he's not, I know he's not saying it is, but it isn't. It just isn't. And, so I guess I'm going to just say I'm disappointed. Now, I know Emoji is saying, well, it's not fair. I'm holding him to a higher standard. I'm not. This is the candidate I support. If I support someone, I do hold them to a higher standard. I hold the Democrats to a higher standard than Republicans. I expect the Republicans are all going to be crooks and corrupt. I'm not going to vote for them. But I do expect more from Dr. West. And you can see that headline there. That's Tim Black, who is an ally of his. So I'm not going to anyone who is critical of Dr. West. I support Dr. West. I still do. Because I think his policies are by far the best for the American people. But, you're only $500,000 to the IRS. I mean, we pay our taxes. I think we expect that's a minimum that we should expect from our candidates. Now, if you want to talk about corruption, the Biden family, it's obviously rank. I haven't seen the direct tie, right? The direct tie. Apparently, Biden got on the phone with some of Hunter Biden's sleazeball, low-rent associates. I'm waiting for more to come out on that. We know that Biden has consistently carried water, curried favor with the financial services industry that's so influential and powerful in Delaware and has done a grave disservice to our people. I mean, this is much more serious than Dr. West's personal life. I'm not going to ignore, though, the fact, it's not whataboutism exactly, but this is relevant. And yes, I do believe if you're going to be a progressive, if you're coming out as a populist, if your position is that we need to treat poor, struggling, working people much, much better, and we need to be much more demanding of the elites, then yeah, you do kind of have to walk the walk. You really do. And sadly, in this case, Dr. West fell short. All right. I saw this article. Now, I will talk more about this. Anyone wants to discuss it, 2402-8372-62. The free-for-all, today's what, Wednesday is Friday. There will be no live stream Monday, which is Labor Day. Arlen will be with us. We're not going to miss Arlen until he'll be Tuesday. So if you want to talk more about West and this issue, you can call on any time. I'm happy to debate it or agree with you. However, we come down, they're not simple. They're not easy. Dr. West has consistently been a champion when it comes to rhetoric and when it comes to supporting progressives like Bernie. And I honor that. But again, at some point, we demand, yes, more from our progressive champions. And I think that's fair. I do. I truly do. So I saw this article in today's NYT by Thomas Edsall. And Edsall is one of the few op-ed writers in the Times that really gives me to think. And he's the one, I think he is pretty damn progressive. He's the one progressive who I find really interesting most of the time, whereas I don't find Krugman that interesting. And I like Bob Herbert a lot, but he doesn't write there anymore. So Edsall is pretty good. And this is an interesting headline. For $200 a person can fuel the decline of our major parties. And he's kind of going after small donors, which I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go after small donors, but I'm going to kind of explain why I think the reliance on donors, period, is a significant issue in our political system and what solutions to this might be. I would note that this headline jumped at me because I saw one of the really sleazy low-rent people, James Carville, talking about this. where he was, calling small donors stupid and the problem. Look, small donors have a little bit of influence, but very little. And they are seeing our country in many times go in directions they really, really don't want. And they're trying to stop that. If, Carville, you had championed true progressive populists who supported reducing your privileges, we wouldn't be in the hole we're in. But according to this article, as I read it, there are some issues that have arisen because of the reliance that, significant reliance on donors. And mostly it's just big donors. It's really huge donors that we see, and often dark money that is all the fault of Citizens United. But even those like Bernie, who rely on small donations, do, and I don't think this is the case with Bernie, but with other, maybe to a degree, but in general, even relatively small candidates who rely on relatively small donations often do get pushed in directions that are not what most Americans want. So let's get into this article, which I found quite interesting, and it does require a little bit of close reading. I think it's very, very instructive as to and explaining why we are where we are, which is a very, very dark place in American politics. So I'm going to, just jump right into this. And he is quoting, remember, this is Edsall kind of going after small. He starts with small donors for just $200, which isn't that small. But so he says individuals who donate to campaigns are more ideologically extreme than most Americans. And I think this makes sense. And he says most donors are clumped at the very liberal or very conservative polls. I mean, if you care that much about politics, that you want things to go your way, to the point where you're willing to give your hard-earned cash, you probably are a bit more to the left or right. But we have to parse that, and we're going to in a little bit. And it's especially, and I think of donors in two different ways. There are those who give because as an investment, right? They're giving because they believe that investment will lead to them getting more money back in the end through government contracts, through a tax reduction, something of that nature. They're looking at it from their own selfish perspective, their own self-centered view. How will this benefit me personally? And then there are those who give because they are hoping for a more diffuse benefit that goes throughout the system. Now, they may benefit personally. So, for example, when I contribute and I want to get universal single-payer health coverage, I think I personally would benefit. But everyone else would get the exact same benefit. So it's a general benefit rather than a unique one. People may give because they're like, okay, we'll get tuition-free college at a public school, or at least much lower tuition rates. So that may benefit their family, but it will benefit society at large as well. At least that's their perspective. And it will benefit many, many others exactly the same way. That's very different than someone who gives to a politician who they think is going to, say, green light a pipeline that they have an ownership, in which they have an ownership stake. That's very, very different. Now, it's not different than someone who says, well, they're going to green light a pipeline which is going to lead to cheaper energy for me and everyone else. That is true. That would be a more diffuse benefit. But I think a lot of those big dollar donations are driven by people who are thinking, I'm going to get something specific to me that isn't a diffuse benefit. So you have the people who tend to be more conservative. They're going to say, my tax rates are going to go down. Or I'm going to get, my corporation is going to get some kind of a special dispensation, or they're very liberal. Now, it's important, though, to understand, and some of the liberals are thinking this is going to benefit all of us. But there's a skewing there, because and what we're going to see is that conservatives tend to be very, very focused on, the conservative donors are focused on economics, then economic changes, whereas liberal donors are focused on cultural issues. But before we get to that, we'll get to that in just a moment. Both, again, are very ideological, and we get a little more to that. I want to just show this, because why it's especially relevant is what you see is the small donors tend to be even more ideologically driven than the big donors. And why would that be? This is in general. I think it's because if you're a conservative, a lot of times you're just giving, again, because you're going to get a special benefit. Again, you get that pipeline built that will benefit you or your company. You get a tax cut that benefits your wealthy family. You get an estate tax, a drop in the estate tax that benefits you because you're going to inherit a lot. But otherwise, you're not as ideologically driven, right? You may want a particular benefit for your company, but otherwise you don't really care about things like gay marriage. It's not really relevant to your life, one way or the other. It may not be. You see that in someone like a Dick Cheney, right? The Cheney family. Cheney family is very, very focused on economics. They don't really care about social issues, cultural issues. Probably the same with the Bush family. So what we see is that the individual donors and spenders are among the most ideological sources of money, much more ideological than the average, but especially small donors. So the rich donor, the big donor, the person who's giving thousands at a time, they're doing it because they want one special favor for themselves. The small donor is trying to drive a real change, a political change. And those donations are what candidates listen to. The people who give them that money, the people who bundle that money, the groups that put that money together. And what you're seeing from those groups, and let's just get right into it. What I just said is, yeah, they're more culturally driven if they're on the left. And we see just how much so is fascinating to me here. Republican donors' views are especially conservative on economic issues relative to Republicans. And remember, the more you give, you may be slightly less ideological. You're just looking for a special benefit of some sort. But we find that Republican donors' views are especially conservative on economic issues relative to Republican citizens. So most Republican voters aren't that conservative. In other words, they're not that aggressively opposed to, say, Medicare for all. But if you own a for-profit healthcare company, you're much more likely to give than the average Republican. And if you own a for-profit healthcare company, you're really, really against Medicare for all. But is there the same skewing on the left? In other words, are Democratic donors especially liberal or progressive on economic issues? No. It's the social issues, gay marriage, trans rights, Black Lives Matter, reparations. Those are the issues that drive the Democratic donors. And so what do we see in our life? What do we see right now? We don't see the squad going to the mat for Medicare for all, because the people who are giving to them, who are contributing to them, are more apparently focused, care more about those cultural issues, social issues. But that's a problem because that alienates, right? Like what's taught in schools. That alienates both Democratic and Republican voters. The focus on social and cultural issues alienates centrist voters who may be more progressive on economic issues. It's a huge problem. It's so much look, and also if you give money, even if look, I give small donations, I don't give big ones. But I acknowledge it. I'm relatively economically privileged. I give small donations because I want the economy to change. But most people who I think have my economic advantages are leery. Honestly, the people that I rub shoulders with, they're leery of higher taxes on the wealthy because they're like, I'm going to have to pay higher taxes. They're leery of any kind of government involvement in the economy because it might affect or impact on their businesses or on their stocks, they fear. Or if they're lawyers, maybe companies won't need their services to the same degree. People who have enough money, even to make small dollar donations, tend to be leery of true economic justice because they're usually a little bit higher on the tree. There's another reason, and let's get to there's also, I think, that a lot of small dollar donors, and this is a little bit of a paradox, are younger. But they may be doing okay. They don't have a lot of, the DINK syndrome, double income, no kids. Maybe they have college debt, but some who are from more affluent backgrounds, they're very concerned with certain issues like the climate catastrophe, obviously, but also social issues resonate so strongly with that group. Identity issues resonate so strongly with that group. For whatever reason, some economic issues, but not jobs, and especially not, and this is really something I thought is fascinating, not globalism. So Americans in general are concerned, and rightly so, about globalism. Asking workers, insisting that workers in America compete with workers in Asia and Latin America is a recipe for impoverishment. But small dollar donors tend not to be those working class people. Both groups of donors are more pro-globals. By the way, this is coming from the actual source that Ed Saul, this is all from a New York Times article, but this is from Ed Saul. But he got the quote wrong. So I had to go back to the original source, which I'll tell you who that is in a little bit. But if you see the Ed Saul article in the New York Times today, it's he quotes the actual source. Both groups of donors are more pro-globalism than citizens, but especially Democratic donors. That's from the original source, and it's not well written. But what it means is Democratic donors are really pro-global. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's identity issues. So we're like a lot of poor younger folks are going to be very pro anybody from any other country, any immigrants. So they view globalism as pro-immigration, which it is to a degree. But it also includes no tariffs, free trade. Globalism means we're one world. We're all, connected to each other by trading with each other. That's devastating for working people in this country. So, but if you have an iPhone, the tech generation, their concern is they want the cheapest tech they can get a lot of times. And again, I'm stereotyping incredibly, ridiculously much, but I think it's fair. So the pro-globalist donors to the Democratic and Republican Party keep us pushing these free trade deals, keep us from having a real, and they keep people in the squad who raise money from small donors from championing, from demanding fair trade, demanding that we raise tariffs, that we manufacture at home. And all of this makes it much, much harder to elect a real progressive. It makes it much harder to get people to vote for Democrats because the policies that these donors, large and small, are pushing are not helpful to the American public economically. Okay, so he says, let me just, what would be your red line where you withhold support? Well, I'll be honest with you, Emoji, because this is going back to Dr. West. If I can't trust you, if I don't have confidence that you're going to make things better for the American people, that's where I would withhold my vote. If your bad acts that we are aware of suggest that you're not a altruist, you're not a humanist, that you're ultimately put your own interests first, that's when I would withhold support. I'm not there with you, with Dr. West. I'm just not there. Now, you could say, well, what about Marianne Williams? Why don't you support her? Well, because her entire career has been built on the, spiritual advisory front, which I just find is a complete crock. I just think it's a whole crock. Now, if I like some of her policies, but her pro-Ukraine war is a huge issue. And also, with respect to her, RFK Jr., and Dr. West, I wish they had been in politics. I want people who have run for office. I generally deprecate people who are first time, running for office for the first time or who have never held office. Obviously, Williams has run before, but she's never held office. Those are all issues. I think the choices that the corporate duopoly is giving us are so bad that I'm flailing for someone better. And Dr. West, in my view, has been much, much, much better than just a little bit better. But yeah, my red line is where I don't trust you. I don't believe, where your record suggests to me that you don't put the best interest of the American people first. And I think that's where I would certainly go with Trump, right? I mean, I think Trump has behaved throughout his life as an extremely selfish, self-centered person. So even when he's pointed and almost sociopathic, and where he claims, oh, well, we have to help the working class with tariffs, and I don't want more dead people in Ukraine. I have a lot of trouble believing that because your record doesn't suggest that those are your priorities. So, that's one of the reasons why I find it both candidates so hard to trust. All right, 240-363-7190 as we come towards the end of the show. I don't know how clear I've been, but I think the point I'm making is that even the small dollar donations don't really push us towards candidates that they may be on our side if we believe in. And, it's so much easier, right? This is the problem. It's so much easier to rally people based on identity. For whatever reason we do, you have like groups like, what is it? Not the Lincoln? Is the Lincoln Project the one that was gay? Log Cabin, right? Log Cabin Republicans. Over and over, we see people are siloing themselves based on identity. This has been a complaint with white progressive groups. It's so hard to appeal to African Americans and other people of color. It's so challenging. We all silo ourselves based on identity. And that's what unions have done that is so good, is they bring people together based on economic interest. But not the elites, but working class people. because it's your workforce, and workforces tend to be much more heterogeneous than social groups. So the point is that donors are either if they're on the left, their focus tends to be cultural, tends to be identity based, and less economic based, or to the extent that they have an economic concern, it's often the wrong concern. They're often saying we got to keep the globalism going, we got to keep the free trade going, which is incredibly harmful to poor, struggling, working class Americans. It reduces job opportunities. It tamps down wages. It hurts unionization. Or even where I, on balance, agree with the progressives on globalization when it comes to immigration, I do think we should have relatively open borders. We cannot ignore the fact that when working people come into this country from other countries, they do exert a downward pressure on wages. There's just no question. It's the ironclad law of supply and demand. When supply for any input, when the supply of any input and labor's input rises, the price that input can demand falls. That's just the way it works. So while I do agree that we need to be much more welcoming to immigrants and treat them much better, the simple fact is that we have to do that cognizant of the fact that unless we take many other steps, that will exert a downward pressure on what working class people can demand in the marketplace. So small dollar donors on the left tend not to be economically populist, and small and large dollar donors on the right and left are focused almost exclusively on economic policies that will benefit them to the exclusion of everyone else. I mean, Bernie does nail it. We'll play this again and we'll get out of here. But Bernie nails it, and he is kind of an exception. I think people looked at Bernie and said, this guy funded his campaign with small dollar donations. We can get to a more populist place by small dollar donations. Even Trump. Well, Trump self-funded, so he's not a good example. Trump, yes, there's populism. He's right-wing populist, but there's populism with Trump. But he self-funded. I wish I had an answer. I really don't. But, even with Bernie, yes, there's progressive populism. Remember how Bernie talked so much about trade in 2016, basically stopped talking about it in 2020. You think maybe, possibly, it's because his donors, the small dollar donors, are pro-global, pro-globalist. They don't give a crap about working people in the heartland. Or they don't care as much about that as about getting cheap iPhones and the identity politics that they have become captive to.
Number of areas. But the reality is that today, 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. We have massive levels of income and wealth inequality. 3 people or more wealth in the bottom half of America. Our healthcare system is a total disaster. 85 million people uninsured, underinsured, while the insurance companies make huge profits. The cost of pharmaceutical drugs, prescription drugs, sky high. So the point is, in my view, the president should tout his very good record. We have got to continue to defend women's right to control their own bodies. But we have to deal with the reality of life today. That's what Roosevelt did back in 1936.
All right, and so that is the argument for Dr. Cornel West, and that's why I still support him, notwithstanding the issues he's facing that I think are of concern, because he is the one candidate who talks consistently and has walked the walk, I believe, through his career in support of poor, struggling working people. And then when you couple that with, and Bernie doesn't mention it, endless warfare, only Dr. West will be on the side of poor, struggling, and working people in the environment, and peace.